What have you been up to today?
I've already started, my day has already started long ago. I was up at 3 o'clock this morning, walking the runway, praying a little bit.
Wow.
We've got the property that we're looking at now.
Oh, yeah.
So I was just out there praying, and I'm also working on my Experiencing God material, so I was out studying a little bit. So then I came back, I took a little nap, and I got up again at 6, and my day's been going kind of ever since then. So first class at 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was telling the students the other day in the mission class, because we started our first mission track class last Sunday morning.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I was telling them a little bit of a story about Parima out in the jungle in Guyana, 200 miles out from Georgetown. And, straight jungle, it's a place where the original Adventist missionaries hiked, and rode the boats out there and everything. And it took them months to get out there, and now we can travel there in 2 hours. It takes 2 hours to get there from Georgetown on the Cessna 182. Still, 2 hours, that's a long flight, generally.
But compared to 2 months? Or
months. Yeah, that probably took Elder Davis like 3 or 4 months to get out there, But at any rate, wonderful people living out there. But that mission station and the neighboring ones have struggled through the years with a lot of difficulty getting people out there, just because of the physical isolation of being that far out and getting supplies into those areas and things. And it's just really hard to have strong consistency there. But they've got a great school there. And if we could develop more interest to be able to get out there, that would be really, really cool. Guyana is a neat country that has opportunity we could have, I'd say it's like a black hole for missionaries, but we could swallow up as many missionaries as we could produce. We could take
because there's so much work.
There's so much work to be done. Yeah, and there's not a lot of people, but the people are open and receptive, and there's just so much work to be done. When we were there, we probably had, I don't know, I was just counting up the other day, maybe 40 different missionary people involved with the organization while we were there.
Really?
And now I don't think there's really even 10 probably. I don't think there's much going on right now. But I was sharing with the students, I was like, if I could send you to someplace, I would send you to Parima, because that's just a place that really tugs at my heart. That Kaikan to the north and other places around there. Left them down the south. We had Bible workers out in those villages, and I know that we could have them again if there was a means of supporting them, being able to get out there to reach them. But anyway, so there's some really neat places out there. Alaska's phenomenal opportunity as well.
Right.
They've listed almost 200 villages in Alaska that are, have maybe in the past had some Adventist presence or some Christian presence in those areas, but not currently ongoing. And it would be just phenomenal to see people be able to go back out to those areas or start new work in new villages that have never had any. That's a lot. You think about, almost 200 villages.
Yeah.
If you send them out 2 by 2, that's 400 people.
Right.
They don't all have to work one in a village, but still at the same time.
But you could have. You could totally have people.
Yeah,
2 people in each village.
Yeah.
That even you might find out that that's not even enough.
Right. Yeah. So if you're talking about the need, it just
Yeah. I don't know if you know any of kind of the history of there was more mission work. There was a kind of golden age of mission work, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was.
And kind of, I've heard a little hints of that. I haven't done a whole lot of research into it myself, but
well, if you study the history of Adventist missions and generally, evangelical missions, there was a great kind of mission awakening throughout the 1800s, and it lasted into the early 1900s. But one of the core concepts of mission, of course, is that the local converts, in an area would step up, take leadership, and kind of take over the church.
Right.
And really, in our Adventist context, that's really where we want people to be self-sustaining, perpetuating everything, and be able to support themselves. And so, as that started happening through the mid 1900s, we had tremendous mission, rallies going out, and all this.
Right.
But as we started getting into the mid 1900s, 1950s, 60s, we still had a lot of missionaries going out. It was a great time for missions. But as we got into the 70s, we had quite a different mindset about mission in the Adventist church. And we started really drawing back on mission. We started, the schools had already been established. They'd already started producing young people generationally. We had
In
generations of
those areas.
Adventists in those areas, yeah. And so those people started stepping up into the pastoral leadership, into the conference leaderships, into the union leaderships, and moving up through those areas. And so it took less and less physical Western input to be able to get those works started. Now that was in the major areas, really, not necessarily in the really remote areas, but all of the major cities and things started having self-sustaining work really in them. You're talking about education, healthcare, pastoral ministry, those types of things. We had schools that were developing those type of people, and they were able to sustain those institutions.
So basically, there was this first wave that went out.
Yeah.
They started these things. They started these kind of missions began to be taken over by the people there.
Right.
And then instead of going out and doing another wave to
exactly
more
instead of
places,
going
they just
beyond,
kind of pulled back, and they're taking care of it.
Right, exactly. It's like that's their work to do mission now, and to go into the deeper areas and kind of thing. So North American missions and Western missions really started pulling back. Well, that happened throughout the 70s and into the 80s actually, and really there was a change in missional mindset, and we lost, as an Adventist church, we lost a lot of connection with overseas ministry. In fact, and you can see the loss of Mission Spotlight. Now they've come back with that recently. So people say, "Oh, we have Mission Spotlight now," but it's very different than what it was when I was a kid. Or when many of us,
How's it different?
We used to have reports. We used to have missionaries actually come back. So there were a number of things. The General Conference had a summer institute of missions at Andrews University, where all their missionaries would get together in the summer, and they would have a training session, and they would go out. They had 6-year terms. They would come back every 2 years. All this what we would think of more as traditional, church-supported mission work.
Right.
And they would have, those missionaries would come back, and when they were on furlough, they'd be sharing around in churches and things, and kind of, there was always much more of a missional awareness because of that. There was a lot more interaction with overseas fields. And there was, 13 Sabbath offerings were big and things. But of course, with a change in focus of that and bringing those missionaries home, allowing, the locals in those areas to take over the work, then we started losing a lot of connection with that. And we saw a decrease in funding for overseas missions as well. And so that's when a lot of those establishments overseas weren't well funded. Even though they may have been able to be staffed, they weren't necessarily well funded.
So then you have those outposts that were strong in the beginning now being left and dwindling down.
And exactly. And the Adventist hospital systems have been one of the biggest to suffer around the world. Our clinics and hospitals. And fortunately, as I said, there has been a reawakening in that. Loma Linda has taken on a lot of those hospitals through a new organization that is developed to kind of support and go out and help those institutions and kind of help them recover a little bit. But they're not what they used to be back in the 50s and earlier mission history. I mean, we had phenomenal hospitals that world leaders would go to our hospitals because we had the best healthcare out there. I remember that from the Philippines, being there at the Manila Sanitarium was the preeminent health institution in the Philippines. Well, we didn't stay there, unfortunately. We didn't stay there. And there are much better healthcare facilities in the Philippines now than we can offer. And I say that with apology maybe to our Filipino staff, because they're wonderful people. They put in a lot. But it's not what it was back in the beginning of the 1900s and through that time. But other institutions suffered as well. Schools suffered, and the church work in and of itself suffered tremendously because of the North American, basically, or kind of our involvement with missions, and we backed off on that. And of course, our church at home here in North America suffered tremendously too, because when we're not outward focused, we become navel gazers, and then we got all these other issues going on and things. Well, we really started seeing that rebound now, the reawakening of missions, coming back in the early 80s, mid 80s, you'd say, mid to late 80s, really. And AFM, Adventist Frontier Missions, is really, I feel, at the cutting edge of that, helping us creating an awareness as a, technically a self-supporting organization, not supported by the General Conference in any measure, financially or anything, really bringing back a reawakening for saying, hey, there are unreached areas out here in the world that are still in need, people aren't going out to those areas. The local people in those areas haven't taken the gospel that next step to those unreached areas. They haven't finished the work. And there's still work that needs to be done. And they really reawakened in young people the desire to go back out into those unreached areas and to take the gospel. And so, around, the time of 87, through the early 90s and stuff, you have like the Scalzi's going to the Philippines, and the early missionaries going back to different areas of the world. And these stories, exciting stories coming back of God at work, in these incredible ways with people who've never heard the gospel before. And you're like, does that even exist anymore? I mean, I thought everybody knew, I thought we don't do mission because everybody knows, No, there's actually unreached people. And we found out the gospel hadn't gone to all the world yet. And that the need is still there and tremendous. And I think it's because of that. Now we see kind of a reawakening came back towards the General Conference, and kind of a grassroots movement came up. And now we do have like global mission pioneers and things. Very different focus maybe than AFM in that way, reaching high population centers and things, where AFM is, language group based. But, a little different, but definitely more of a focus on mission from the General Conference level. But even right now, if you go and you look at the calls that the General Conference has, they're not necessarily calls for a supported 6-year term where you're going to get paid to go somewhere. There are a few of those calls, and they may be at higher levels in the church structure, a presidential level at some, divisional level or something, some level like that, or doctors at certain levels to manage institutions or something.
Yeah.
But you're not, generally your mechanics, your construction workers, your pilots, your even your nurses and your technical skill sets at the grassroots level, teachers, those will either be volunteer positions or they'll be filled locally. So it's not what it used to be, where they're going to send you a salary to go overseas for 6 years, bring you back every 2 years, give you all the support and insurance and all this stuff.
Right.
You got to provide all that yourself.
And
if you're going to
it's difficult in general just to be a missionary, because that's kind of right. Like you were talking about just the isolation sometimes.
Yeah.
And just it's difficult in general. And now you're saying it's not like it used to be. It's not even as supported as it used to be.
Right.
Even when it's supported, it's difficult. And now it's like
And you can't imagine. I mean, it would be difficult for any thinking person with an understanding of the current context of missions to think that the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists should go in and send 400 missionaries out to Alaska. I mean, come on.
Right.
That's just or hundreds down to Guyana to get into every little village in Guyana. And you think, well, that's not even our work, maybe, or maybe that's not even the focus. But somewhere, at some point, somehow, those people have to know.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just neglect the whole country and say, oh, no, those people don't matter.
Right.
I mean, somewhere, somehow, we have to come up with a plan, some thought that brings us back and says, what happened to the Great Gospel Commission?
Yeah.
Well, we can't just ignore God's command, really, literally, His mandate, to go out to all the world and teach every nation, tribe, kindred, tongue, people everywhere. We can't ignore that. So what do we do? Do we just ignore it, or do we say the locals got to do it, or what's the plan here?
Yeah, what's the plan? And like you said, it can't be just from a top-down movement. You can't just have some organization be like, you go over here. It has to be something that is an inspired movement, a revival, a movement around missions that sparks like a grassroots movement from the ground up.
Right. It is. And we've really seen that. There's been a reawakening and a much more of an acceptance now, at least in North America here, of what we used to call self-supporting ministries. I don't like the term personally self-supporting, because it's really God supported. It's really faith supported. The more you get into it, and community supported, absolutely. The more you get into it, the less of self there really is. So I don't like that self word. But in the old days, we used to call them self-supporting ministries. But they have become much more favorable, and I think the General Conference has embraced those more, because they recognize the work is too great for us to do, and it doesn't work in the same context it used to. And we need a new vision, a plan, and that does come through other organizations pitching in that effort. Now, getting that acceptance around the world has been a struggle as well, because sometimes, like where we worked in the Philippines, sometimes, if you weren't a General Conference employee or a Philippine Union mission employee, then you weren't with the church, or whatever. But at the same time, generally there's acceptance for those things, especially once they see that an organization is there to help. They're not there to take. They're there to help and build up the local church and things. And then they're very, very supportive usually. So, yeah.
You were one of those people, on the ground. You saw the need of more missionaries, of more people to fulfill that Great Commission. And what was kind of that journey of going from someone being in the mission field to kind of having this dream and this desire to do something that would bring more missionaries into the mission field to do what you were doing there?
Yeah, well, I think as a young person, I was very motivated by the idea of adventure and excitement and going out and living on the edge and helping people. And I see that oftentimes in the young people that I work with. But that's what captured me at the beginning. I could do something that I found very exciting and adventurous and serve God, dedicate my life to His service. And He gave me something to do that was so much fun and so rewarding and so involved my energy and my sense of adventure and all those things. So that's really kind of what captured me at the beginning. But as I matured in the mission field, I saw that there were greater needs beyond what I could fulfill. And I guess at some point in our lives, we kind of move beyond that point where we're kind of, it's just about me and I'm invincible, to the point where you're kind of more like, really, this is going to take a team, and it's going to take a lot more resources than I have, and it's going to take a lot more. And as we came back from our assignments, my desire was more and more, how can we get more people back out there? If I can't be there serving right now, how can I get someone else to do that and to be excited to do that? And if I just could be a force multiplier in doing that, wow, how cool would that be? I mean, if I could replace myself with 10 people, that would be so cool, Or over a little bit of time, as one person, I'm out there working for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. I'm one person times 10 years. But what if I could do 5 people, one person the first year, 5 people the next year, 10 people the next year, and then by the time you get to 10 years, how many people could be out and how many places could it be going and how much impact could it have? And that just really, that idea intrigues me now more than it did when I was, 25.
Sure, and then there's this exponential effect as those people then eventually maybe come back with the same zeal and create this, make that movement even larger and larger. Right. Until we can finally go home. Right,
exactly. I think it needs to be, like you said, it needs to be exponential here at the end of time. It can't be a static, linear, progression. Something's got to break here.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all of the events and the world and everything in the realm of things going wrong.
Right.
Kind of crying out that Jesus is coming soon.
Right.
And you see all of those things rising at this exponential level.
Right.
And sometimes I'm like, I just can't wait until you see that movement going to the world. Because the verse says, in the gospel of the world, the gospel, this kingdom shall be preached unto all the world, and then the end shall come. It doesn't say the natural disasters and this stuff is going to get bad enough, and then the end will come.
Right.
All of that stuff is happening. But we have to
while we do the work. Yeah.
And exactly. Seeing that movement just take off as God just pours out His Holy Spirit, and we get this, this second Pentecost. That movement is just going to be so inspiring to see.
Yeah, I had someone tell me just the other day. They said, "Well, we're on the verge of World War III. I don't know if I should be going right now." And I'm like, "Now is the time to go even more. Let's go. It's World War III. Let's go."
Yeah. So I mean. Yeah,
I don't think we're on the verge of World War III. I'm just saying, that's not something that's going to hold us back. Yeah, we may be. I don't know.
And Ellen White says that we will do work when it is difficult that we had wished we had done when it was easy.
Exactly. Yeah. That's very true.
Do you have a story? Is there? Because I know that you talking about kind of your time there in the mission field and the need for more missionaries. And you were like, oh, I'm gonna tear up. I'm gonna cry up. Which means there's something that was very, very touching that happened there. Maybe a couple stories, and of course it'll probably mean you'll cry on camera. But
right. Well, you know that. I have a hard time sharing things that are near and dear to me on my heart, I guess.
Yeah.
That I'm passionate about. But there was a time when, and I may have shared this story before, but. There was a time when we were in Guyana specifically, when I remember got a call to, fly out to a village, carry a passenger and a body back to a village. And, it's always difficult carrying a body because you don't know the circumstances around and things, but...
That means that you took that person from the village to get medical care and they didn't make it.
Right. Right, and they're deceased and we would take people to Georgetown, of course, because that's the center for healthcare in the country where you can get the best healthcare available there. But that would mean that they were hundreds of miles from their family and where they, any local support would be. There's no support in Georgetown for them.
Right.
So I didn't bring the person out, but they had come out on an earlier flight. She and her husband had come out, and the woman did not make it at the hospital, died there in Georgetown. And it's really sad in Georgetown because without family support, without any infrastructure there to help, the bodies are just hauled out to a graveyard and often given a very shallow burial, if any at all. And it's very interesting to go into the graveyard there because there's not a lot of respect for the dead there.
Yeah.
But at any rate, they kind of have just mass graveyards for people who die in Georgetown and don't have family support. It's public cemeteries.
Wow.
So at any rate, it's a big service to the community to be able to return a body back to the community so that it can go through, and they can have closure in their community.
Yeah.
Well, so I went out, I remember going out early in the morning to prep the airplane there in Georgetown because we had to return these people back to the village, and we just do this as a service to the village and the villagers there. And the husband showed up, of course, with the ambulance, brought the body to the airplane. Again, very unceremonious. It's just wrapped up in trash bags. The woman's body is just wrapped up in black plastic trash bags. And I remember already in the morning, it was probably 9 o'clock or so by the time we had the plane all fueled and ready to go. And we're carrying the body over to the airplane. Of course, you're in the tropics and hot and sweaty and everything and wet, and my arms are sweaty, and we're slipping on this black plastic trash bag because a dead body weighs significantly as you're struggling and trying to get it into the back of an airplane. We've removed the back seats out and things, but we're trying to maneuver things around. Plus we had luggage to carry, baggage and things, supplies for other mission stations that we were going to be delivering to after we stopped there. So we kind of just piled everything in the back and all around there. And the husband, this lady's husband, was there, and he rode up in the front seat with me, and we took off and we climbed up the altitude, but really didn't have a whole lot to talk about. What do you say when this guy's obviously grieving, the loss of his wife, and we're headed back to the village for the last time for her, and so we really didn't say a whole lot, other than just casual comments, but. For the most part, people living in the villages, they're animistic in nature. Their worship is not a strong belief in the Creator God or the afterlife. And so if there's an afterlife, it's generally comes back to haunt you, or the villagers, they have spirits from the dead, but they're not positive interactions, right? So it's all negative. So they don't really have a hope in the second coming, in a belief in Jesus and the promises, the things that give us joy in death, they don't have that.
Right.
So it's very, very difficult. But at any rate, I remember flying back to the village there, and the place where we're landing there is just an open field, mountains all around it. There's an open field there where the village, all the people had run up to the airstrip there, landing in the grass. I remember shutting the engine down so I wouldn't chop anybody up with the propeller, because as you come in, they just swarm the airplane.
Oh, yeah.
And I just had to kill the engine and stop the prop as we rolled in to all the people. And they knew that we were headed back. Of course, we called ahead on the radio. And there were a few elders in the village who were carrying the box on their shoulders, the casket that she was going to be carried in, that they had made. And so as we landed, of course, people just piled around the airplane. And the husband got out, of course, he just fell in a heap on the ground because now all his family's around him and everything. He just fell apart, you know, and he was just crying. I remember sitting there in the cockpit while they were opening the doors and getting the body out and putting her in the box, and he was laying, you know, he was crumpled in a heap on the ground there. And I remember sitting there shutting down and going through my checklist and everything with the airplane and looking over and seeing what I assumed was her family, you know, on the ground because they were faces down on the ground, like laying prostrate on the ground, and they were beating the ground and just wailing, you know, just because, like I said, death there is not a hopeful experience.
Right.
You know, you don't have any joy in death. It's a lot of pain and suffering, and how will they go on now? What will the children do? You know, and just on and
no
on.
hope of ever seeing them again.
Yeah, no hope.
Nothing.
Yeah, so and going through that experience and kind of suffering with them through that experience, and knowing that I had to leave there and go on. I had people counting on me in other villages as we were carrying supplies and doing other things there that day. But you know, they started carrying this woman's body back in the casket. And I remember the village captain coming up to me, and calling him Tushao. He came up to me, and he said, "Captain, have you brought a pastor with you?" And I said, "No, you know, where am I going to carry a pastor? You know." But he said, "Well, don't you have someone who can conduct a Christian funeral for us?" And I was like, "No, we don't really, you know. Our nearest missionaries were, you know, hundreds of miles away." And he said, "Captain, when could we have a pastor? When could you send a pastor to our village?" Sorry.
No.
But, you know, I was like, well, we really don't have anybody who we could spare to send here, especially, you know, we had Bible workers out in various areas strategically placed in other villages. Mm-hmm. But the need is there.
Yeah.
You know, and it's tremendous. And that's one village. There are villages all over, and that's one little country, Guyana, you know, about the size of the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. Right. And one capital city at the top, one road that runs north-south down to the city down on the southern end of Guyana. But in between there, you know, hundreds of villages and places out there where a young person with vision to serve the Lord could go out and find hungry souls for the harvest.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's just that one village and seeing them having no hope, having nothing that, I mean, probably as someone who has always known and believed that when someone dies, I will see them again at the resurrection, not having that hope, I have no idea what that even feels like.
Right.
And just the idea that there's so many people out there who have no hope in that, who are hungry, like you said, and
just to hear the words of hope from a pastor. You know, they say, just to conduct a funeral. You know, would you send someone just to conduct a funeral for us? And that village, I know, was open to having a worker in their village. We would have had a church. We could have put something there. You know, I mean,
if only there had been a missionary.
Yeah, if we could send somebody. So I tell my students even now. Just the other day, working with Praise God, we have 14 students lined up in the mission track this year. I mean, a drop in the bucket, but praise God, you know, we're working with 14 kids here at Oklahoma Academy. But I telling them, you know, if I could send you guys, if I could plant a little seed, a little vision in you, you know, there's so many places that I would send you. But I'd start in Parima, I'd start in Kaikan, I'd start in that village, you know, because I know the great need out there. I've seen it. So.
And that is what is so, like you said, so motivating to see more missionaries go out.
Yeah.
And what was kind of how did you end up from the Philippines coming to Oklahoma Academy and being able to help with the development of a program that would be able to eventually send out missionaries to villages in need like that? Yeah,
and you know, we just have to give God the glory. I mean, God works out all the details in His own time and in His way. So, you know, we struggled in Guyana, and we had some family medical issues that needed specific help. And so we went from the Philippines, we were back in Michigan for a little while, then we were down in Guyana. We came back from Guyana with those medical issues, and praise God that we were able to get excellent medical care to resolve those issues. But then I was in Michigan with my family, and my wife and I were just praying. I had no peace working in industry. I was just trying to support my family, get through this situation.
Right.
And I prayed daily, constantly. I prayed, Lord, put me in full-time ministry. Not that I can't work in the automotive industry, and be a good witness, but somewhere, Lord, I know that you have a place for me to be in full-time ministry. And I had no peace about it, and was contacted by a friend to come and check out Oklahoma Academy. And we did that, and we had no intention of moving to Oklahoma at the time, of course, and no desire to do that. But at the same time, when we got to Oklahoma Academy, we saw the Spirit of God working on campus. We saw the Spirit of God in the staff and in the students. And we said, this is a loving, nurturing environment. We want to be here. And they wanted to establish an aviation program, which, we had skill set in that, mission aviation. And so I said, we would be happy to come and help develop that program. Now, it worked out really well that we had kids that could go to school here at the same time. But that wasn't necessarily the driving factor at the beginning. It was just that we could come here, and initially I thought, well, this might be an interim, until we can get back to the mission field kind of thing. But we saw quickly that wasn't going to be.
There was a bigger plan.
There's a bigger plan. There's a bigger picture. You can't just start a program for 1 year and then leave kind of thing, or 2 years even. This is going to be 10, 15, 20 years in the making. And God has a much bigger plan here. And he's developed that. As we've been here at Oklahoma Academy, we've seen that, and we've seen it grow. So.
Right. So you got here, and the idea was to start this mission aviation program.
Right.
And at the moment when you got here, there was no plane. There was just a 1,300-foot runway.
Right.
And what did you do?
Yeah, no airplane, no equipment or funding, which is huge. I mean, aircraft are expensive. This isn't a simple deal for me to be able to just go buy an airplane, or something. It's not something that is initially, and I kind of like that about aviation. It's not something that's initially available to anyone, just anyone. And the reason I say that is because you have to see God at work in order to see that program come about. And so that's what we prayed for. I said, based on my experience in mission aviation and knowing that ahead of time, I told the young people at the beginning of the school year when we first came, I said, I'll teach ground school because I can do that. I can teach you about flying, and we can just study the books and things. But in order to get an airplane and actually start flying in here, we're going to have to start praying. And we're going to have to see God at work. He's going to have to provide. And so we went that first school year just praying, and I think you were in some of the classes with us, just praying for an aircraft and for a ministry to be able to work with.
Yeah, and at that moment, it was Elga and Cheris, right? They were in the program.
Yeah.
And so that first year, it was just praying for the airplane and doing ground school and probably experiencing God, working through that book, and just doing what you could with the resources that God had given at that moment.
Right.
And what happened?
Yeah, and we didn't have, like you said, we didn't have resources. We just used what we had available, just our time, basically, and the information we had. And we started praying towards an airplane. We went to an ASI convention that fall after the first year I was here, and talked with a couple of different friends that just kind of shared the vision of Oklahoma Academy, what they'd like to do. And I had found, just searching on the internet, I was looking and I saw an airplane that I thought would be good potential for us to purchase. It was a small 1946 Taylor craft. It hadn't been, nobody was hot after buying it or whatever, it was kind of just sitting there.
Right.
And I had talked to the people a couple of times, and they'd, given us a price on it. It was $18,000. Which to us was, $18 million or $18 billion, because when you don't have anything, you can't do anything. And so we just presented that idea to a few friends, and they put up some matching money and said, if you can raise the rest of it, we'll put up, $10,000 if you can get another person to give up,
Do you remember what year that was?
That was 1999, I believe. Excuse me.
Wait. Not the year of the plane. the year.
That was 2019.
2019. Okay, was that year that you were just praying, doing what you could, and working towards getting the plane? And so then 2019.
Fall
summer.
2019, yeah. Yeah, summer, fall. Yeah. I think it was August, first week of August, 2019. And so with that challenge, we reached out to some other people, and by the end of that convention, we had developed, I think, commitments and money in hand for almost $24,000. And
Wow.
of course, we were praying through that whole thing that God would provide, and we've been praying all along. But I really think, as I've seen God work, I've been through that experience before as well, early on in my training. And I saw God work in the same way. And I don't want to say this is always for everybody or anything, but I often think that the way God works with us is He wants our hearts to align with Him and His plan and His vision first, before He gives us all the equipment to go do it. Because once the equipment's there, then you're off and running and you do your own thing and you're following your own plan. And I think that God was again teaching us to wait upon the Lord.
Yeah.
And when we did that, then He provided in His time and way. And we got a little airplane that year. We started using it. So the second year I was here, we started using that airplane in the training program and started a couple of students through their training, got them a good ways through their training.
Yes.
And that was a real blessing. Trained a number of other people who are now serving out in various areas. So,
Elgin and Cheris?
Well, Elgin Cheris with
others
Warren Downs
as well.
is in Alaska. And there's a couple of others.
Warren Downs finished his...
He got through solo here in our Taylorcraft. He got through solo.
Really?
This is the first airplane. I mean, his dad was a pilot, so he has flown before, but not officially with with training or anything. But he took the first 20-some hours with me in the Taylorcraft, and we got him through solo. And then he went to Alaska and finished his license in Alaska.
Okay.
So
and
we only had a couple weeks to work together.
That's where this year, Miguel and Kian are about to go to Alaska and Dillingham to work with Warren Downs.
Yeah, to work with him.
Wow.
Yeah. So he has his pilot's license now, has a little bit of time under his belt, and has flown around Alaska quite a bit. And so now he'll be taking some of our recent graduates and hoping to mentor them. So we already see kind of the perpetuation of the cycle. It's kind of cool, really. So.
That is so cool. So now, fast forward from then, that God launched it off the ground, literally.
Yeah.
Into the
up and flying.
Right. He brought the program to take flight, and with that first plane, that first Elga and Cheris, they went to Peru.
Right.
The first graduates from the Mission Track program at OA.
Right.
And now we fast forward from that to this year, and
the explosion
what
of this
there
year.
now? Yeah.
So it's interesting because we started out with 2 students and we developed, the aviation program at the beginning. I said, this is just going to be for missions. It's not going to be for commercial or military or as good as those other endeavors are. We want our program focused on missions. So if you come here to do mission aviation training, you are going to go as a missionary somewhere. That's going to be part of your program. So we require 1 year of service after the training. And Elga and Cheris, 2 girls, were the first ones to go through and complete that training, and then finish up their pilot's license, and then go to Peru. Like you said, they worked at our air base in Pucallpa there with a couple of other missionaries that are stationed there, and worked on the airplanes there and things. The next year, we had 6 students, and we said, well, we recognized that aviation wasn't just the only calling that a person could have to mission service, right? And so we recognize that young people are interested in a number of different areas, and we have to kind of take note of that. And really, Oklahoma Academy's tagline is "Workers for the Harvest." It's not workers for mission aviation, right? So we wanted to open this up to the harvest field, right? And what are some of the other things that we teach here at Oklahoma Academy that students can learn here that are really viable in the mission field today? And so we opened it up to digital media students, and we also opened it up to construction, which we teach on campus as well. And so having those 2 skill sets, we thought, we'll start with those additional, so 3 skill sets altogether: mission aviation, construction, and digital media. Digital media encompassing, web design and graphics and video and photography and all those things. And so putting those skill sets together really is, I think, beneficial for a lot of mission organizations. A lot of people can get involved in missions with those skills. So we opened it up, and that next year we had 6 students join that program to be able to. 5 of them were seniors, 1 was a junior. We had 3 in mission aviation, 2 in digital media, and 1 in construction.
Yeah.
So we were doing pretty well with that, and we graduated, again, those seniors this last year, 5 of those students, and they'll be going out here
in the next couple months.
Yeah, within days, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they'll be leaving very soon and going to impact the world already, right? As soon as they graduate, right? But now this year, because we have had now a track record of a couple of years, and students have let other students know, and we've shared it at the vision at a couple of other different venues. We have 14 students in mission tracks this year, and we've added the potential for other mission area, emphasis areas as well this year. We've started a music mission track,
yes,
which is really fascinating,
yeah,
because how many people are offering viable entry into mission service using music?
Yeah.
And just really neat. But so this year we have students in aviation, digital media, construction, and music. Those 4 areas this year. But we'd like to open the program, and if we had students this year, we'd open it up in agriculture, we'd open it up in education,
yeah,
and Bible working, and various other tracks as well. So really, the program has kind of exploded,
yeah,
from a very, very much just prayer at the beginning with a few interested students, to growing to where they're actually going out, they're actually serving, they're coming back now, and then now growing into wider areas and
right,
much more potential. So,
and now there's how many planes?
Oh yeah, so we started out with the Taylorcraft. We added a Cessna 150 and a Cessna 172. So we have 3 flyable aircraft right now, and then we have a number of project aircraft that have been donated and that we've acquired. We've got I think about 7 aircraft on campus now, which
3 flyable,
3 flyable. Another project, and the projects are fun because they're kind of what we work on with the students and learn about airplanes and structures and how to work on them and things like that. So it's always part of my vision for the aviation program to have fixable airplanes on campus and be able to work through those. So we have a lot more than we can actually fly right now. We could probably actually use right now. But so if anybody wants to play, but at any rate. Yeah, God has blessed from such small beginnings to the point now where we really have been overwhelmed now with work, with students, with aircraft. But still, it's not up to the need. And that's the part that really comes back. And I guess would you can see tugs at my heart. And not just that, it really keeps me up at night. It really keeps me praying. It makes me, because with all the students we could send out, and we would love every graduate to go into mission service immediately. That would be fantastic. We recognize that's maybe not the ideal for every student. We understand that. But even if we could graduate every single student, we need hundreds of schools doing this program or this type of program.
Yeah.
We need more people training young people to get out into the harvest field and do it as quickly as possible, because the need is so great and the time is so short. The Mission Track is basically a program where a young person, junior, senior year, 11th or 12th grade, can choose a skill set that they feel God may be developing in their life, an interest in or passion for service. And they can take that skill and go get into immediate active service for the Lord. So what we do from Oklahoma Academy's end is we want to inspire young people into service. We want to give you the training. We want to give you the support, the opportunity to go serve, and actually set up a ministry venue for a young person to serve in. So we take care of kind of the back end and making sure that you're trained, equipped, and supported to go out into ministry for at least 9 months to a year after high school. That's when we want you to get a step in that direction. The idea is that young people can go get started on viable ministry, in effective ministry in an area before they get weighed down with college, before they get straddled with debt, before they get a family going, before they get children and a house that they have a mortgage payment, all those things that oftentimes keep them from going into mission service. We want them to get a taste of it So hopefully that can help set a trajectory for their life. It will also give them a taste of the reason to come back and go to college. We want to see you have a vision for why you come back. Why am I going to take these nursing classes? Because I'm going to go back to the field where I know nursing education is so important. Or, you know, the whole digital media track. If you go out and you find a place that's struggling, they don't have a social presence, they don't have promotional materials, they don't have the benefit of being able to be seen by the wider community, the wider Christian community, and you put them on the map, but you don't have a skill set in some kind of video editing skill or something that you need, and you're going to come back and develop those skills so you can go back and help out even more. I tell the students, everything we teach and everything we do should wrap around the possibility that someday Jesus is going to use me to use this skill set somehow to share the gospel, right?
Definitely.
Somehow.
Yeah.
It has to fit in that context. And by giving young people a vision to go out into immediate mission service, we give them a context for a lot of their further education. What Oklahoma Academy does with the mission program is we give them training to get them out there, right? We help them develop sponsorship for financial support to keep them there. We help them develop the technical tools and skills and equipment that's needed to actually go and serve. So getting all of that together and then finding a place to put them where they'll be mentored by long-term missionaries that are already there and supported in their journey into missions. On the student side, we're looking for young, committed, young Christians who are eager to serve their Lord. They want a technical skill in an area that they feel passionate about in service, and they're willing to give a year of service to get started in that track. Yeah. From the parents' side, they have to look at that and they have to say, I want my young person trained to serve the Lord. That's what I want to send them to Oklahoma Academy for. And we're willing to support this program, and we're willing to send them for a year, out into the mission service. And I actually have a contract that parents have to sign when they start the aviation program, saying this is the intent, this is where we're going, this is what we're going to do, and commit to it. Because if we're not committed to it, that's going to cost a lot of money that isn't directed correctly, and it's not a wise stewardship use of those finances if the student has no intention of going. So it's not a place where you can just come and get your private license and then be like, yeah, that was fun, whatever. No, this is a place for people who really want to serve the Lord. We're talking about rightly training an army of youth. That's really what we're talking about. We're talking about sending these kids out to the front lines. Let's go. Let's get this started.